In this video, I'm going to show you the college recruiting email strategy responsible for millions of dollars in scholarships. So this is one example. This is one of our families that recently got a $150,000 scholarship. A lot of that was pushed forward by email. And we've done this for lots of families. So I'm just going to show you exactly what we've been doing and what's been working. So if you don't know who I am, my name is Jack Kruger. I run D1 Scholarship. In the last 18 months, we've sent over 100,000 emails to college coaches, so we have a lot of data on this stuff and what works. We've reviewed more than 5,000 highlight videos. We've worked with hundreds of families across 13 different sports, and we've generated millions of dollars in scholarships. I don't know exactly how much. I'm not going to make up a number, but it's a lot. Now, real quick, before we dive in, I want to say that results are dependent upon a multitude of factors like strategy, luck, timing, skill, ability to follow directions, work ethic, knowledge, and about a million other factors, okay? So the recruiting process is very, very hard, and I make zero promises about what your kid will be able to achieve. So I'm simply showing you what has worked for many of our families in recruiting. I'm not necessarily saying that you can just go do this instantly and expect to see incredible results. Okay, so here's what we're going to cover in this video. I'm going to show you why email is the fastest way to get exposure. I'm going to show you the mistakes that you're probably making with email and why you're not getting responses right now, or why you might not be getting responses right now. I'm going to show you our exact process for generating mass interest with email, and then I'm going to show you how we can help you set this up. All right, so a couple examples. This is one family. Been very impressed with the responses so far. 11 D1 and 11 D2s that have shown interest. That's better than I think we anticipated. This family right here, you see queued up 100 emails to go out, about 10 replies within 24 hours. Pretty cool. This family has a total of 20 plus responses to keep updated. That's after the first email campaign. And so I'm just going to show you really what has been going on and how we've been generating results like this. So here's why email is the fastest way to get exposure. Now, real quick, let's first define exposure. What does that actually mean? Because if you're in the recruiting process, you probably hear this word thrown around a lot. I want to put a definition to it, okay? So exposure simply means getting evaluated by a lot of college coaches. That's it, okay? So on the surface level, it means getting in front of college coaches so they know that your kid exists. That's what exposure means. So if we're going to say it's the fastest, which is what I'm claiming, we have to measure it against other methods of exposure to prove that it is the fastest. So here are some other methods of getting on college coaches' radars in the recruiting process. The first one is through social media content. So this is if your kid is on Instagram or Twitter and they are making posts to the timeline. They take their game video, they post it to the timeline, maybe they add a stat line, something like that. And this is what it means to post social media content. Now, social media content in the recruiting process is like a lottery ticket, all right? So you can possibly transform your recruiting process basically overnight. If you post a video and it goes absolutely viral, you might get 10, 15, 20 schools contacting you literally the next day. Right? But the problem with this is that it typically takes many posts before this ever happens. And that's if it ever happens. For a lot of players, they never win the lottery, right? So for many players, even if they are going to win the lottery, they have to make a ton of posts before they get the one that actually wins. When people win the lottery, they usually don't buy one ticket that wins, right? They buy a whole bunch of them. Same thing with this. So as you have to post a ton of content, that's going to take a lot of time. So social media content is not the fastest way to generate exposure in college recruiting. Then you have social media DMs. I would call this the second fastest. All right, so I'd put this right behind emails. I think that you can generate interest pretty quickly with DMs, but you have to be very smart about how you do it. So the problem with Twitter DMs or Instagram DMs is that you can't send as many as fast because those programs, those softwares, platforms, I should say, that's the word I'm looking for. Those platforms are trying to crack down on the number of messages that you are sending cold. And so you run the risk of getting your account shut down. This happened to one of our families before they came to us. They sent way too many DMs on Twitter and their account literally got shut down. So then they joined our program. We had to create a whole new Twitter account for them and build it up from scratch. So if you're going to send messages or DMs on these platforms to get exposure, one, I think that's a great idea, and you should definitely do that, but you have to pace the messages even more than you do with email. which you already do have to pace. Otherwise, your emails are going to go to spam. And so it just means that it slows down how many DMs you can send. And that means that you're not getting exposure as quickly as you'd like. The third one would be coach connections, right? And the reason that this is a problem, it's nice in terms of speed, right? Because your coach might be able to make a call and that college coach will get that call and call you immediately. That's great. The problem is that you're not actually getting exposure. You're not getting in front of a lot of college coaches. You're getting in front of a very small select group of coaches because your high school coach, your travel coach is not going to make 50 calls for you. They might make 5, but they're not going to make 50 because they made the same promise to you that they made to everybody else in their organization, which is, I'm going to help you get to the next level. They do not have enough time in their day to do that for every single player that they work with. Okay. So you're not actually achieving exposure if you're just relying on coach connections because they're only going to contact 5 schools, and that is not exposure. And then finally, you have tournaments, showcases, and camps. So this isn't fast because you're limited to the coaches at a specific event. Like if you go to an event in Florida, the only coaches you're getting exposure to are the ones who are at the event in Florida. So even if a coach flies in from Georgia or California, you're only getting exposure to the ones that are in attendance there, which means every time you want to get more exposure, you have to attend another event. And obviously, that takes time. You can only do that on weekends. There's only select weekends, and obviously a ton of money behind that too. And so none of these are as fast as email. With email, you can get mass exposure from schools all over the country in just a few days. And more realistically, really, we're going to call it a few weeks. So you can get it in just a couple days, but our campaigns, I'm going to walk you through what those look like. They typically take 2 to 3 weeks to go out in entirety. But even that is so fast. There's nothing else in college recruiting that allows you to do this. And so while it's just one of the many strategies that we use to generate interest in offers, we don't want to be a one-trick pony. There's a lot of different ways that we can drum up conversations with coaches. It is one of the most important. So I want to show you how quickly this can even happen. This is a message from one of our families. If you look at the third box down here, you can see she says, the craziest part is that he sent the first emails on June 3rd. So in literally 15 days, he went from nothing to being recruited. That's 2 weeks. So this family's entire recruiting process was turned around in 2 weeks. This is the same family. I got another update from them a couple months later. If you look at the bottom box there, she says, we were managing 22 relationships at one point. It was a bit too much, but also a terrific problem to have. Before we found you, if someone told me he would be getting texts, phone calls, and building relationships with 22 different college coaches, I wouldn't have believed it. Here's the key part. It was 0 to 22 in a matter of weeks. It's wild. That's how quickly email can work. I'm not making a promise. I'm not saying it's going to work that fast for you, but we have seen this before with more than a few families, okay? Now let's talk about some common email mistakes, okay? Because many people struggle to get email responses and therefore they don't believe email works. I've seen some people out there who are like, oh yeah, emailing college coaches doesn't work anymore. Yeah, it doesn't work anymore if you use the same strategies that people were using 5-10 years ago in recruiting. Like you're contacting 20 to 30 schools and you're doing a whole bunch of nonsense in there. Of course it's not going to work for you, right? But look what happens if you do email correctly. These are all recent stories, success stories. All of these that I'm showing you throughout this whole video, they're all recent. So this family, 20 D1s, 10 D2s, and 10 D3s. That's 43 schools that they're talking to. This family, in just 4 short weeks, we've gone from talking to 5 schools to having conversations with 25, right? This family have about 35 that they're updating. How about this family? Emailing back and forth with 79 schools. Sorry, let's go above. Email campaigns were good. Between the campaigns they were sending before they came to us and after, they're emailing back and forth with 79 schools. And this isn't just a simple one-time response to the initial email. It's multiple responses over the past few weeks leading to calls as well. So if you do email well, that's potentially what could happen for you. Again, no promises. So let's talk about some common mistakes because I get messages from people all the time sharing their emails, and you guys are doing some crazy stuff out there. So there are literally dozens of mistakes that you could make. I'm just going to include the top 8, all right, because I see these a lot. The first one is not contacting enough schools. So if you're only contacting like 20 to 30 schools, you're going to have a really hard time generating traction through email. That was a common strategy, 5-10 years ago. It was a very different recruiting landscape. Today, it's not the same. If you expect to get a whole bunch of traction only sending that amount of emails, you're setting yourself up for failure. We typically recommend at least 100. And if that scares you, I'll talk about that in a second. But we usually recommend contacting at least 100 schools. The second common mistake is contacting schools above your talent level. And let me be clear here. I'm not saying you can't contact schools above your talent level. I'm just saying those shouldn't be the only schools that you contact. So it's okay to contact reach schools, but you should also be contacting schools at your level and safety schools. So we usually recommend contacting all 5 divisions because there's literally no reason not to. It cannot hurt you in any way, shape, or form. It can only hurt your ego. That's it. And I don't think that that's a good reason. So I believe that you should be contacting all 5 divisions. That's what we recommend for many of our families. The third mistake is CCing multiple coaches on the same email. So obviously, there's multiple coaches on staff at a school. A lot of players will send one email and CC all of them. This is a mistake for a number of reasons. And I mean, the first reason would just be because you're emailing multiple people, you can't personalize it to the coach. You then have to personalize it, even if you were going to like 4 coaches at the same time, you lose the effect of that personalization. The second thing is that each of those coaches is going to look at the other one in the room and expect the other one to respond. So we've actually seen lower reply rates when you CC multiple coaches on the same email. The fourth mistake is a long email. So coaches don't want to read an essay. They're not here for literature class. This email should take less than 30 seconds to read. Literally pull out your phone and time yourself. If it takes longer than that, you wrote a bad email. The fifth mistake is what I'm going to call unimpressive stats. So a lot of families believe that their kid has stats, biometrics that are really good, and they include that in their email, but they don't understand that the college coach doesn't believe that those stats are good. So when they see the stats in the email, they don't even watch your video because they see the stats, they don't think they're good, and then they never click on the video. That coach never even got eyes on your kid, right? And so we don't even include stats a lot of times in an email unless they're absolutely amazing and we're absolutely sure that it's going to benefit the player. So for you, as you're sending these, I highly recommend that you don't include stats in your emails. I think that they are more detrimental than beneficial. And there are a lot of people who would disagree with me. I don't care. We've contacted hundreds of thousands of college coaches, worked with hundreds of players across 13 different sports. We have a lot of data behind this, okay? I have a pretty good idea of what works and what doesn't. Information overload. So this is what happens when a parent, usually it's the parent, sometimes it's the kid, but it's usually the parent, loves their kid, right? Thinks super highly of them and wants the coach to fully understand what this kid is capable of and who they are and all the good reasons that they should recruit them. And so what they do is they pile all of this information into one single email, and it's overwhelming. And a coach gets all of that and they're like, I don't even know what to do with this. And so they end up just clicking off the email regardless, right? And so really what you want to do is just give them the necessities. Give them the small bit of critical information that they need, and that's it. You want to keep it as bare bones as you can. And this also then kind of pairs with what I'm going to call the paradox of choice. The paradox of choice is when you have multiple places that you're giving the coach to go in the email. So to give you an idea, we would typically just include video. Now, we might include multiple videos, but no matter what link you click on in our email, you're going to video. But there's other people out there that will link to a recruiting profile. They'll link to transcripts of some sort. They'll link to, a social media account and video and coach contact information. And there's a bajillion things that you're linking to, and it's just too much. You want to push them directly where you want them to go, and that's video. Okay. And then the eighth common mistake is no follow-up. So we've sent, like I said, over 100,000 emails to college coaches. I can tell you with great confidence, the majority of your email responses will come from follow-ups, not the initial email. So you need to contact schools more than once, even if they didn't respond. Okay. Now, it should also be noted that one of the main factors that determines whether you get email responses or not is video. Okay, so I didn't list it as a mistake, but if your video is not dialed in, it's impossible to get positive email responses. And I don't use the word impossible very often, but I'm telling you, if your video is not good, if you're using a bad video strategy, if the video is bad quality, if the player's not good, if you're not showing the right skills, it literally will be impossible to get email responses. This is the proof. Video is the proof that your kid is a good player. It has to be dialed in order for cold outreach, which is sending emails, sending DMs. It has to be dialed in order for those things to work. So even though I haven't mentioned it above, I don't have enough time in this one video to talk about everything that you need to do with recruiting video, but just know that's an absolutely integral piece that has to be dialed in order for any of this to work. You could do everything that I'm about to tell you perfectly, but if your video is not dialed in, it still won't work for you, okay? So here's our email process. Now, we set this up with our clients. I'm gonna show you what it looks like. So here's the quick list, and then we're gonna walk through each one of these things in detail. So you need a target list of schools, right? You need schools that you're gonna contact. You need the contact information for those schools. We set up automated email software because it's going to be very challenging to contact 100 plus schools, multiple coaches, multiple times manually, okay? The fourth step, writing the email scripts, setting those follow-ups, determining the cadences, how often you're sending those follow-ups and how much time in between. Step 5 is pressing send and monitoring the metrics, so tracking the email campaign, and then moving into our follow-up strategy, which is how we build interest over time, turn interest into offers, okay? So step 1, target list of schools. Now, for each email campaign, we typically shoot for 100 schools in the campaign and at least 2 divisions. So we don't want to send a campaign that only has 20 or 30 schools. It's a waste of time. You're not going to get very much traction doing that. So we usually do at least 50 and we shoot for 100. We've had some people who do more than 100, but the problem is if you do more than 100, you end up, the campaign takes way too long to go out because you have follow-ups that are going out as well. And by then, I mean, if you have 300 schools in a campaign, that campaign could get pushed out, 2 months. I mean, it would take forever for that thing to go out. So we limit it at 100 schools, but we want to get as close to that as possible. And then I say at least 2 divisions. In a perfect world, all 5 divisions are targeted in a campaign, right? You're contacting D1, D2, D3, NAIA, and junior college. You're going to get a really good idea of where your kid belongs. And then whatever interest you get back, you could just double down on that conference, right? Or on that division, I should say. So if you get a bunch of D2 responses, then maybe your kid's a D2 player. Then you do another email campaign just at a bunch of D2 schools and you get more interest, right? So this also depends though on what schools you've already contacted, how many schools you're talking to. Like there's lots of other factors that determine how many divisions you hit in a single campaign. And that's just something that you have to learn how to navigate, right? That just takes time or someone who has experience and has done this before. But typically I would say if this is your first email campaign, you've never sent out emails to college coaches, you should target all 5 divisions. Now, there's a lot of people who say, I'm not interested in 100 schools. I didn't even know that many schools existed. Listen, every single family that's ever worked with us has thought or said the exact same thing. So you're in good company, but that doesn't mean it's not the best thing to do. So it is critical that you contact this many schools. And a lot of our families are just like Taja here. If you look, she says, not sure we would have reached out to that school without your need of wanting to submit so many emails at once. So they got recruited during their senior year. They didn't start until senior year. They were behind the 8 ball. I said, great, we need to go contact a whole bunch of schools. And she said, well, we're not really interested in that many schools. And I said, you're a senior. I don't care. And by the way, even if you're a sophomore or junior, I don't care. You need to contact a lot of schools. Just trust me on that one. I promise. It will only benefit you. And so here she is saying, we probably wouldn't have reached out to this school that their daughter finally committed to, which is a D1 school. Her daughter didn't start the recruiting process until senior year, and we got her to a D1 school. How does that happen? Because we contacted schools they never would have thought of going to. And now they're fired up about it. And we get a lot of families who are like this. They come in saying, I'm not interested in 100 schools. By the end of the process, they go, thank you so much for encouraging me to reach out to more schools. That was a really important thing. I appreciate you doing that, right? So I'm just passing that on to you. If you're saying, man, I'm not interested in 100 schools, you're in a great position. You're in the same company that literally all of our clients have ever been in, okay? So here's how to find schools for your target list. If you're like, how do I get to 100? Now, we personally, like D1 Scholarship, internally, we use software and we give it to all of our clients. So our clients just go in, they put in the divisions they're interested in, the states or locations they want, the size of school they're looking for, the major their kid wants to study, if they know it, religious affiliation or not, the GPA that they're interested in, and then it just shoots out a list of schools. Like, here's 117 schools that fit your criteria. Bam, there's our target list, right? But obviously, you might not have access to that software. I'm not going to name the software because that's the kind of thing that people pay us for. So I'm not going to name it. But here's how I recommend you do this if you're just doing this on your own. Start with all the schools that are in your state. So start there and then go to all of the bordering states and then add any states that your kid would be willing to play in, and then get all the divisions for these schools or these states. So D1, D2, D3, NAIA junior college. And you'll probably get like close to 100. At the very least, you'll get 50, which is better than nothing. So that's how I'd recommend you do that if you're not working with us, okay? So now, hopefully you have your list of schools that you want to contact. Now we got to gather the contact information. So this isn't absolutely mandatory, but we typically contact multiple coaches at each school. So we'll contact the recruiting coordinator or director. We'll contact a specific position coach, if applicable. We'll contact assistant coaches, occasionally the head coach for smaller programs, just sort of like feel out as you go through the process. You know, hey, this is the time we should contact the head coach. This is not. And so one school that we contact might have 3 coaches. So the math here is if we contact 100 schools, because that's what we have on our target list, and we do 3 coaches at each school, it means that we're going to end up contacting 300 coaches, right? This is why it's critical that you have some sort of automated software, because this is going to absolutely lose your life if you don't have software to do this and you're trying to do this manually. Because not only are you going to now contact 300 coaches, but I'm about to tell you that you're going to get more responses to follow-ups than the initial email, which means you need to contact each one of those 300 coaches multiple times, like 3 times. So 300 times 3 is actually 900 emails. Please don't try to go do that manually. You're going to drive yourself absolutely insane. So here's how we find the contact information. Again, we just use software. And so our clients just are able to find that instantly, basically, or we even do it for some of our clients. We'll get all of their contact information. They simply give us their list of schools that they're interested in, and then they're done. We go get all of the coaches that they should contact and their names. We get their email addresses. We get their Twitter or X accounts just to sort of make it easier for families. Like we do that for a lot of clients. So here's how I recommend you do this if you're doing it on your own, okay? So go to Google and type in the school name. So it'd be like UCLA, and then the sport, like soccer, and then coaches. And of course, if you're men or women, go ahead and include that as well. And then click one of the first links is going to be one to the website, to the coaching staff. Click that. You'll find the coach's name and you'll find the contact info there. Now, if you don't see it there, you can try this cool little tactic, which is you can navigate to the staff directory for the entire school. So this is usually found on the academic website. So not the athletic website for the school, but like the school's main website. And you can find your way to the staff directory. And sometimes the coaches are listed there. And so if this happens, it's actually a great school for you to contact because it means that a lot of players were not able to find this coach's contact information. So you are more likely to get a response because there's less players in their inbox, if that makes sense. So you can try out that little tactic if you want. The third step is to set up the automated software. Now, I'm not going to share the name of the one that we use because it's a huge competitive advantage. Again, that's not the kind of thing I give away for free. But a couple other recommendations that you can look at. You can look at smartly.ai. You can look at instantly.ai. Those are some other automated softwares that I've used in the past. Okay, so setting up this software typically involves a few things. You'll create an account, right? And then you're going to connect an email address. Now, this will either be generic or custom. It depends on the software that you use. Some of them only allow you to use a custom email address. So it'd be like, for instance, an email account might be at facebook.com, right? Where Facebook is the company name. And that would be a custom email address. Some automated softwares require you to use that, and others don't. So you'll have to connect your email address. Then you're going to create a campaign. A campaign is just a fancy word for a big batch of emails. So if you contact, 100 schools and you contact them 3 times each, then that would be one campaign. So you'll create your first campaign. You'll upload the target list of schools. So all the contact info that you put together. Typically, we would put that in a Google Sheet. You would end up downloading that Google Sheet as a CSV, which is a specific file type, and then you upload that into the software, right? And then once you upload that, you'll map all of the fields so that the software can dynamically populate personalized elements. This is very important. This is how you can still personalize emails across hundreds of coaches automatically, right? And so essentially what we do is we just tell the software, hey, I want you to put coach's last name here, and then it just cycles through all of the coach's last names so we can still personalize every single one of these emails. It's wicked cool, right? So this is a huge advantage. So not only are we sending mass emails automatically, but we're also personalizing them, usually with like the coach's last name, the school name, stuff like that. Now, we help all our clients set this up. You could be bad with technology. We'll still make it easy for you. So this is a huge advantage. It's something that I recommend you learn how to do or have us do for you, because this is what you're going to compete against, right? If there's somebody who plays your kid's position in grad class that we're working with, you're directly competing with them, and they're going to be using this. So the fourth step is to write email scripts, set the follow-ups, and determine the cadences. So a couple things on email scripts. So first is that it shouldn't take more than 30 seconds to read, right? And we kind of already mentioned this in the common mistakes section. You got to keep your email short and to the point, okay? Nobody wants to read an essay. Don't include links to recruiting profiles, transcripts. This is part of that paradox of choice that I mentioned. You want to direct coaches to one single place, and that should be video, right? Video is going to be the most important part of your process. The only exception to this is if your kid runs track or is a swimmer, then everything's based on the stopwatch, and you definitely should only send stats because that's all that's pretty much going to matter for you. I would not send stats unless they're incredible. So if your kid doesn't play, it doesn't run track or swim, then I probably wouldn't include stats unless they're absolutely amazing. Like, they have to be so incredible that there's absolutely no way that there's anybody in the country who has better stats than you. If that's the case, then you can include them. If that's not the case, leave them out. Let the coach watch the video instead. And then just remember, information overload and paradox of choice, these are key things that can result in coaches not watching your kid's video, not responding. So you want to make sure you're following best practices there. Now, to give you an idea of these scripts, again, I'm not going to share the scripts because I don't want all of you guys using them. There's a good chance hundreds or thousands of people end up watching this video, and I don't want everybody stealing our scripts. But to give you an idea, people look at our scripts and they go, that's it? And that's exactly the point. Yes, I want that. You want to be very direct. You don't want to waste their time. You want to get straight to the point. The entire purpose of the email is to get them to watch your kid's video. That's the only reason that you're sending an email in the first place. Okay. And then, like I said, if your kid runs track or swims, then it's just to check your stats. You can include stats in that case. So follow-up cadence and content. We typically send 3 emails to each school. We've tested different models of this. We've tested 4, we've tested 2. Right now, 3 is working. All right. Now, if you come back in like 2 months or something, maybe it's different. We're going to continue to stay up to date with whatever's working in recruiting right now. But as I make this video, 3 emails to each school is working really well for us. So the first email is usually like a general introduction, and then of course we push to video. So this would just be general information about the kid, right? We want to keep it super short and sweet to the point. Video is the main idea here, but nothing too crazy in this email. The second email is where we're going to give coach contact information. So this is where we'll say, hey, if you want to contact my high school coach or my travel coach, here's his contact or her contact. Just giving the coach someone else that they can call besides the player. And then the third email is expressing genuine interest in the school, making sure that this coach knows that you are genuinely interested in the school and you would really like to see what it looks like or potentially looks like to play there, right? Now, we usually send these 4 to 5 days apart. So it'll be first email, wait 4 days, second email, wait 4 days, third email. Sometimes, depending on how quickly we have to get the campaign out, we may or may not send emails on weekends. We usually try to start campaigns at the beginning of the week, but again, it all depends on timing and how quickly we have to get something like this out. Now, the cool piece of this is that if a coach responds, the software automatically shuts off the follow-ups. So you don't have to watch this software all the time. Once you press start, if a coach responds to the first email, they won't get the second and third. The software automatically shuts those off, which is super nice. And now keep in mind, everything that I'm talking about here is for a general introductory campaign. So we handle different campaigns in their own unique way. right? So what I'm saying here doesn't apply for other campaigns like follow-up campaigns, showcase camps, right? If you're going to go to a showcase or a camp, you're going to let them know that you're going to be there. We use a completely different cadence, completely different content, right? Visits, second campaigns, like there's a whole bunch of different kinds of campaigns that you would send in recruiting. So just keep in mind, don't come to me and say, well, I used this for a different purpose and it didn't work. Yeah, there's different strategies for different kinds of campaigns. And then the fifth step, press send and monitor metrics. So quick warning on this, email metrics are imperfect. Okay. Email metrics are tracked by something called a pixel. That pixel basically follows someone around on the internet to know what it is that they're looking at, what they're doing, what their activity is. So if you've ever been on like a website for a clothing brand and you click on a product and you don't buy it, and then the next like 5 days, you just get slammed with ads for that product. And you're like, man, how did they know? They know because they tracked you via a pixel. Now, ESPs, email service providers, Google, Yahoo, some of these other ones, like I mentioned SmartLead, I mentioned Instantly, the one that we use that I didn't mention, all of those also use pixels to track things like who's opening your emails, who's clicking on the links in your emails, right? So they're using pixels to track that, but also it's getting harder for pixels to be more accurate, right? So they're not going to perfectly track data. We use metrics for general direction. Don't treat them as gospel. Just because it says that 8% of coaches clicked on your video doesn't mean that it was exactly 8%. It might have been 25%. It might have been 2%, right? But in general, it's going to give you a direction. So for instance, here's some things that we track. On opens, anything under 40% probably needs to be looked at, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything wrong. It depends on how long the campaign's been going out, who that campaign's going to. There's a lot of things that go into that, but anything under 40% at the very least just needs to be looked at. Anything over 75% is great, okay? And then anything in between, you're pretty much on par. Now for clicks, this is where you're gonna see the most erratic tracking. I mean, we see swings from 60% all the way down to 4%. And it depends on the type of campaign. Again, there's a lot of things that go into that. And then, of course, replies. So we see about a 10% reply rate to emails, which is why, by the way, if you only contact 20 to 30 schools, you're not going to get a lot of traction. Because what's 10% of 20? 2, right? What's 10% of 30? 3. So that's why you only get 2 to 3 responses when you contact those schools. That's actually a very standard reply rate, right? Now, again, it's a 10% reply rate, but this depends on a lot of different factors. How talented your kid is. What types of schools are you reaching out to? What's the quality of your outreach? How early or late are you in the process? All of those things are going to affect your reply rate. Now, one thing I'll say, wait at least 2 weeks when you send this campaign out to review the metrics. And preferably wait until the campaign's finished, because those metrics are not going to be perfect 1 week in. They're not going to be perfect even 2 weeks in, right? You can't accurately gauge these metrics before then. So wait at least 2 weeks, and preferably until the campaign's done, to start reviewing metrics and looking at that kind of stuff. And then, of course, step 6, at this point, we get responses, right? You have schools that express interest, and now it's time to move into our follow-up strategy. So this is where you need to build relationships with the coaches who positively replied. So you're going to want to prepare scripts for these common responses. So a generic camp invite, this is what anybody is going to get. It doesn't show genuine interest, but also you need to do something with it. You can't just let that go and be like, they're not interested. They sent me a generic reply. No, you have to do something with it, because you might be getting a foot in the door and you're wasting that opportunity if you're not using it. A personalized camp invite where they're still inviting you to a camp, but it's much more personal and it feels like they're genuinely interested. You have a school where they respond and it's clear that they're interested, but it's nothing concrete, right? They're like, yeah, I really like your video. And that's kind of it. You got to know what you're going to do with that school. The coaches who want to hop on a phone call, and then the coaches who want to speak with your coach. Now, there are more, but these are the main ones. So you need to figure out what your scripts are, and I would prepare these ahead of time for how you're going to respond to these coaches. And then once you do that, you need to determine your strategy and cadence to continue communication with these schools, because coaches are not magically going to become more interested in your kid. Once they express interest, you have to actively grow their interest over time. We do that through our follow-up strategy, but you have to have a way to continue the conversation with college coaches and continue to build and make meaningful progress with them over many months. So all of this is how we produce results like, he's now in communication with 22 schools compared to 3 when we first started with you. 20 responses after the first email campaign. This family, we've gone from limited email communication with 7 to almost 20 in the past month, many with substance and potential. This family right here, check this out. It helped to realize that he most likely is the best fit for a D3 program. So it's a D3 caliber player. And a lot of people think, well, if he's a D3 caliber player, he can't get that much interest. But look right here, probably talking regularly with about 50 to 60 coaches at a time. You're like, what? How does that happen? I'll tell you how this happens. They send out the first campaign to all 5 divisions, right? And do they get any D1 responses? No, because the kid's a D3 caliber player. So who responds to that? Well, they get a couple D3 programs who respond. They go, oh, maybe he's a D3 player. So then what do? They do a second campaign that has a huge number of D3 schools. Now they're getting mass exposure at a level that they know the kid is capable of playing at, and bam, now he's talking to 50 or 60 coaches, even though he's a D3 caliber player. You might see that amount of interest and think, oh, the kid must be a phenom, but he's not. You see it right there. The mom says he's a D3 caliber player. This is what exposure looks like in the recruiting process when you take this stuff seriously. This family right here, before we kicked off this first campaign, there was only one school, a D1, that he was talking with. As of today, there's currently a total of 14 D1 programs he's received interest from. So don't tell me that this only works with D3 schools. That's not accurate. It works all the way at the Division I level. So if you'd like us to help you set this up, along with some other helpful stuff, we do lots of cool stuff, then you can click in the link in the description to schedule a call with us. We'll walk you through our program, exactly what we do. We will help you set this entire automated system up. We'll take on a lot of the work for you and really just put your kid in the best position possible to get as much interest and as many offers as you possibly can to ultimately help them get to an awesome school. It's a great fit for them where they thrive, they continue their career, they get a great education, and who knows, maybe you get a scholarship worth tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. So if that's of interest, click the link in the description to schedule a call with us. Of course, it's parents only, and otherwise, I will see you guys next time.